On June 6, 2024, a jury in Milwaukee County delivered a verdict in a case that has drawn significant attention. Maxwell Anderson, aged 34, was found guilty on all counts related to the death of 19-year-old Sade Carleena Robinson. The case involves allegations of murder and the subsequent dismemberment of the victim. The crime is alleged to have occurred on April 1, 2024. This date marked the first time Anderson and Robinson had gone out together. The events of that evening led to the tragic outcome that became the focus of the trial. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The victim in this case was identified as Sade Carleena Robinson. She was a young woman just 19 years old at the time of her death. Sade was a college student pursuing her education and future aspirations. Her life was tragically cut short under circumstances detailed during the trial. The loss of Sade Robinson has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the wider community. Her identity as a student and young individual was central to the narrative of the case. The defendant is Maxwell Anderson. He is 34 years old. Anderson was the individual Sade Robinson met with on the evening of April 1, 2024. His actions following that meeting became the subject of the criminal investigation and subsequent prosecution. The trial sought to establish his culpability in Robinson's death and the handling of her remains. The initial contact between Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson occurred approximately a week before April 1st. They reportedly met at a bar. This meeting led to plans for a first date. On the evening of April 1, 2024, Anderson and Robinson were together. They were observed at two different bars during the course of the evening. Surveillance footage and witness accounts placed them together at these locations. Following their time at the bars, the evidence suggests they proceeded to Maxwell Anderson's apartment. This location is alleged to be where the events central to the charges took place. The transition from a social outing to Anderson's residence marked a critical point in the timeline. Prosecutors presented a case alleging that Maxwell Anderson killed Sade Robinson at his apartment. The specific details of how the killing occurred were part of the evidence and testimony presented. The state contended that the death occurred at this location. Following the alleged killing, Anderson is accused of dismembering Robinson's body. This act is a separate charge reflecting the handling of the remains. The dismemberment is alleged to have taken place at the apartment or another location controlled by Anderson. The allegations further state that Anderson scattered Robinson's remains across Milwaukee County. Body parts were discovered in various locations over several days and weeks. This scattering complicated the investigation and recovery efforts. Anderson is also believed to have set fire to Robinson's car. The vehicle was found burned, and investigators linked it to the case. The burning of the car was allegedly an attempt to destroy potential evidence related to the crime. The prosecution argued that these actions were part of a deliberate effort to conceal the crime. The dismemberment and scattering of remains, along with the destruction of the vehicle, were presented as evidence of Anderson's intent to evade detection and accountability. The prosecution relied on various forms of evidence to build its case against Maxwell Anderson. Surveillance footage played a significant role. This footage helped establish the timeline of events and placed Anderson and Robinson together at key locations, including the bars and potentially near Anderson's residence. Cell phone records were also crucial. Analysis of cell tower data and phone activity helped investigators track the movements of both Anderson and Robinson's phones. These records corroborated the timeline established by surveillance footage and provided geographical data relevant to the scattering of remains. Photos recovered from Maxwell Anderson's phone were presented during the trial. These images were central to the prosecution's argument regarding Robinson's state and Anderson's actions. The content of these photos was described in court. Some photos allegedly showed Anderson groping Robinson. These images were presented to suggest Anderson's behavior towards the victim. Other photos allegedly depicted Robinson in an incapacitated state. The presence of these images on Anderson's device was a significant piece of evidence. It linked Anderson directly to Robinson during the critical time frame. and provided insight into the circumstances immediately preceding or during the alleged crime. The discovery and presentation of these photos were impactful elements of the trial proceedings. Further evidence included the discovery of human remains in multiple locations across Milwaukee County. Forensic analysis confirmed these remains belonged to Sade Robinson. The scattered nature of the remains supported the prosecution's claim of dismemberment and disposal. Investigators also collected physical evidence from Anderson's apartment and vehicle. This included potential trace evidence, biological material, and items that could be linked to the alleged dismemberment. The burned vehicle provided additional forensic evidence. Testimony from law enforcement officers, forensic experts, and other witnesses contributed to the body of evidence. Each piece of evidence was presented to the jury to support the state's narrative of the events that transpired on and after April 1, 2024. The cumulative weight of this evidence was central to the prosecution's strategy. A significant aspect of the prosecution's case involved allegations of premeditation. The investigation uncovered information suggesting a detailed plan existed. This plan was allegedly shared by Maxwell Anderson with an informant. The informant testified about conversations with Anderson. According to the informant, Anderson outlined how he intended to carry out a killing. This testimony suggested the crime was not spontaneous, but rather the result of prior planning. The informant also claimed to have seen Anderson's basement. This location was presented as the place where the murder was allegedly planned or intended to occur. The informant's description of the basement was part of their testimony. The informant claimed the basement was covered in a tarp. This detail was presented to suggest preparation for an event where containing mess would be necessary. The presence of a tarp was interpreted by the prosecution as evidence of planning for a violent act. Furthermore, the informant claimed the basement contained saws. Saws are tools that could be used in dismemberment. The alleged presence of these tools in the planned location supported the prosecution's theory regarding the dismemberment charge. The planning allegedly occurred as far back as a month prior to Robinson's death. This timeframe suggested a period of preparation and intent preceding the actual events of April 1st. The informant's testimony regarding the planning timeline was a key element in arguing for the first-degree intentional homicide charge. The defense challenged the credibility of the informant and the interpretation of this alleged planning. However, the jury considered this testimony alongside other evidence when reaching their verdict. The allegations of planning added a layer of calculated intent to the prosecution's narrative of the crime. Maxwell Anderson was charged with multiple felony counts. The most serious charge was first-degree intentional homicide. This charge alleges that Anderson caused the death of Sade Robinson with intent. Additional charges included dismembering a corpse. This charge addresses the alleged actions taken with Robinson's body after her death. It is a separate offense, reflecting the violation of human remains. Anderson was also charged with arson. This charge relates to the burning of Sade Robinson's vehicle. The state alleged this was done to destroy evidence. Another charge was hiding a corpse. This charge pertains to the alleged scattering of Robinson's remains across different locations. It addresses the attempt to conceal the body. The jury deliberated after hearing all the evidence and testimony. On June 6, 2024, the jury returned its verdict. Maxwell Anderson was found guilty on all counts. The verdict signifies the jury's conclusion that the prosecution had proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The guilty findings on all charges reflect the jury's acceptance of the state's narrative regarding Anderson's actions, intent, and subsequent efforts to conceal the crime. During the trial, the defense presented arguments challenging the prosecution's case. A key aspect of the defense strategy questioned the intent to kill. While not disputing that Robinson died, the defense sought to argue that the death may not have been intentional first-degree homicide. The defense also argued a lack of evidence of a struggle. They suggested that the scene or the victim's remains did not conclusively show signs of a violent fight. This argument aimed to counter the prosecution's narrative of an intentional killing. The defense also likely challenged the credibility of the informant and the interpretation of the evidence presented. They aimed to create reasonable doubt regarding Anderson's actions and state of mind. However, the jury ultimately rejected these arguments by finding Anderson guilty on all counts, including first-degree intentional homicide. Following the guilty verdict, Maxwell Anderson faces a mandatory sentence. In Wisconsin, a conviction for first-degree intentional homicide carries a mandatory life sentence. The judge will determine whether Anderson will ever be eligible for parole. Sentencing is scheduled to take place at a later date. The court has set August 15, 2024, as the date for the sentencing hearing. At this hearing, the judge will formally impose the life sentence and make a determination regarding parole eligibility. The outcome of the trial is a conviction on all charges. Anderson will be sentenced to life imprisonment as required by state law for the homicide conviction. The sentencing hearing will finalize the legal process regarding his punishment. The case of Sade Robinson's murder and dismemberment has had a profound impact on the Milwaukee community. The nature of the crime, the age of the victim, and the widespread search for her remains generated significant public attention and concern. The events sent shockwaves through the area. Robinson's family and loved ones have been at the center of this tragedy. They have publicly expressed their devastating loss and grief. The trial process, while necessary for justice, has undoubtedly been an agonizing experience for them. Victim advocates and community members have rallied in support of Sade's family. The case has highlighted issues of violence against women and the vulnerability of individuals meeting strangers. It serves as a somber reminder of the potential dangers present in society. The verdict brings a legal conclusion to the criminal proceedings. However, the emotional and social impact on the community, and most importantly, on Sade Robinson's family, will continue. The case remains a tragic event in Milwaukee's history.